Welcome to Culture Screen, where we analyze culture through countdown. The Book of Five Rings. If you are interested in Japanese samurai culture, you have probably heard of Miyamoto Musashi. The Book of Five Rings is a book on martial arts and Japanese swordsmanship written by Miyamoto Musashi near 1643. In the text, Musashi is interested in results on the battlefield. When Musashi describes certain principles, he constantly pushes the reader to practice the lessons they are reading in the book rather than just reading them as philosophy. Musashi was also an advocate of a two-sword style of fencing called Niro Jutsu. Traditionally, Japanese fighters would wield a single katana using both their hands. In Niro Jutsu, the swordsman wields the katana in one hand and a wakizashi in the other hand simultaneously. Musashi was also an advocate of training with two swords at all times in order for the swordsman to familiarize themselves with using two swords. The Book of Five Rings is essentially a collection of sayings Musashi used to say to his students. In the text, Musashi dives into a mixture of Eastern philosophies and traditions and weaves them into his own philosophy. Just like the physical world is divided into different physical elements in Buddhism and Shintoism, the five books refer to the five methods and techniques of battle. Musashi studied Enmi Ryu and Tori Ryu early on in his life, both of which were arts created by his grandfather and father. He would later focus on Kenjutsu and Nidoken. Afterwards, Musashi would master these arts and model the two styles into one of his own, and began teaching at his school called the School of Nittanichi Ryu. The Book of Five Rings contains the Book of Earth, of Water, of Wind, of Fire, and of the Void. In the Book of Earth, we are introduced to Musashi's metaphorical discussions on martial arts and how training is similar to building a house. This chapter discusses Musashi's strategy. Here, he stresses the importance of knowing the smallest concepts as well as the biggest concepts. That students should quickly grow from learning one concept to many by studying constantly. By doing this, practitioners would be able to see every little detail in time of war or battle. In the Book of Earth, we read about different types of weapons for different scenarios. Musashi argues that spears should be used on the battlefield only, whereas the longsword katana can be used nearly anywhere. Musashi also admits that a sword is no match for a gun. He also urges his students to learn more than one weapon. Relying on one weapon, according to Musashi, would allow your enemy to learn, predict, and counter your attack. By alternating weapons, a fighter could throw off their opponent. In this chapter, Musashi also dives into the importance of timing your attacks. For Musashi, a good fighter must know when to attack and when not to attack. In the end of the Book of Earth, Musashi goes over the rules all of his students must follow from the beginning. 1. Think honestly. 2. The way is in training. 3. Become familiar with every art. 4. Know the ways of all professions. 5. Distinguish between gain and loss in worldly matters. 6. Develop an intuitive judgment and understanding for everything. 7. Perceive those things which cannot be seen. 8. Pay attention even to trifles. And 9. Do nothing which is of no use. In the Book of Water, Musashi's style, called Nitten Ichi Ryu, or Two Heavens, One Style, is described. In this chapter, Musashi discusses his spirituality, philosophy, and strategy. Here, Musashi recommends that his students be like water, that they must be able to change their disciplines and methods for any style in order to overcome them. In the same way water always seeks the most efficient and productive path, so should fighters. Fighters should also master many other aspects of their life in order to stay flexible and balanced. Musashi was a Buddhist, and much of his teachings on spirituality revolve around principles of calmness. Musashi writes, both in fighting and in everyday life, you should be determined though calm. This sense of balance is similar to the yin and yang concept of ancient Chinese philosophy. For Musashi, the overusage of a weapon would reveal your weakness to your enemy, and therefore simultaneously reveal your spirituality. The main teaching in this chapter is that the perfectly balanced spirit will also be a perfectly balanced physical being. Having a balanced spirit and body would ensure victory. A good fighter can take advantage of this information. They can observe their enemy and see into their spirituality and physical weaknesses by being balanced themselves first. Musashi also stressed that just like your spirituality and physical being should be balanced and perfect, so should everything else you do. For example, something as small as your stance is of great importance for Musashi. He expects every little detail to be accounted for. Musashi ends this chapter by describing the types of attacks his students should learn. Strikes can be delivered at the 5 areas called the 5 attitudes of swordsmanship. The first is upper, 2 middle, 3 lower, 4 the right side, and 5 the left side. These 5 locations are the 5 areas open for attack on an enemy's body. Musashi also describes multiple specific fighting techniques to use. In the Book of Fire, the fire represents the heat of battlefield. Musashi describes the different types of fighting methods available to a swordsman. Musashi goes into how you should assess an environment and how to approach certain situations as well. He also explains the advantages of using armor and how a single man or a group of men ought to prepare themselves before battle. Musashi also goes over the importance of your location on the battlefield. Fighters should be mindful of castles, buildings, the moon, the sun, and any other objects that may obstruct their view of the entire battlefield. Holding higher ground during a battle was also important to Musashi, as it was strategically advantageous to fight your enemy from a higher altitude. Just like Musashi is an advocate of avoiding battlefield obstacles and low ground, he stresses how you must force your enemy into difficult terrain to expose a weakness. Another example is forcing yourself onto the enemy's non-dominant hand, so moving toward an enemy's left hand if they are right-handed, for example. Fighters should also feign weakness in order to expose the weakness in their enemy. Fighters must learn to identify when the enemy is strongest and weakest in order to time their attacks and cause the most damage. In the Book of Wind, which can also be read as the Book of Style, Musashi describes why other schools or styles of his time were not suitable for swordsmen. In this chapter, Musashi asserts that the only way to know your way as a warrior is to know the way of your enemy first. You should be able to adopt new strategies and methods depending on the strengths and weaknesses of your enemy, and that the only way of doing this is truly to study your enemy as precisely as possible. Musashi explains how he has not seen another school as efficient and all-encompassing as his school, that while other fighting schools teach how to use the sword, his school of Ichiryu taught fighters how to think strategically. Musashi says that there is a strategy above sword fighting that fighters must learn beyond sword fencing in order to be great. He explains in detail how other schools do not abide by his foundational principles, such as the importance of battlefield view, footwork, and the reliance on a single weapon rather than a multitude. Musashi does require us to learn these other schools' methods and strategies in order to find and uncover their weaknesses. In the Book of the Void, Musashi's thoughts on consciousness and on the correct mindset to have in battle are discussed. It is apparent in this chapter that Musashi's philosophy was heavily influenced by Zen Buddhism. The Book of Void deals with that which cannot be seen. For Musashi, the warrior must learn to see what they cannot see. That which cannot be seen is what Musashi calls the void. What we cannot see is also part of the level of consciousness available for us in this reality to perceive. In this last chapter, Musashi states, "In the void is virtue and no evil. Wisdom has existence. Principle has existence. The way has existence. The spirit is nothingness."
We upload new videos every week, so subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the like button as well. Click the notification bell to be notified of when we upload these videos. See you on the next episode of Culture Screen.